Haley, did you have just the best Easter?
I did. It was so sweet. How was yours?
Mine was so good. My mother-in-law, so Sawyer's birthday fell on Easter this year. So we celebrated
Oh,
his birthday and the resurrection of Christ. And my husband's mom, Nicole, she came and visited. And so it's just so good. Anytime you get to be with family again, you know what I mean? It just
yeah.
recharges you. What are we talking about today?
Today we're looking at the dark side of finding your purpose.
Okay. I remember when we were sitting down trying to think of what we wanted to talk about this month. And we brought up this idea of, oh, is there a
Mm-hmm.
dark side to purpose? What I was thinking with that is what happens when we get so paralyzed by figuring out our purpose that we don't do anything at all? You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So, for
Yeah.
example, if I am so focused on med school, but I am not focused on the point of medicine, which is healing and helping people, are we truly reaching our purpose? Can we lose ourselves to like the goal or get so paralyzed by the goal that we end up not fulfilling what we were actually supposed to do all along? Can we get so driven that we forget to be where we actually are?
Hmm. Oh, I'm so excited to show you our submissions on purpose. But before we do that, should we head into group chat?
I am so excited about group chat. Let's do group chat. Okay, I have been waiting for today because we have our first voice memo. And I can't plug this enough. I want you guys send your voice memo. We love getting your written things and that's awesome and we'll keep reading these, but it just adds another element of connection. I think for the listeners and for Haley and I, when we
Mm-hmm.
hear your voice, it just makes it so much more real. So send your voice memo to whatifimwrongpod@gmail.com and we would love to play it on the show. If you are new here, group chat is where we share a dating story and ask, is this horrible or holy? And then send it to the group chat for feedback. Haley, can you play us today's submission?
Yes.
Hi, Heather. So I live in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, which is very much similar to the tri state area. Very close. Everyone who lives in the suburb either takes the metro or subway into the city for their work, daily activities, then metros back home to the suburbs where they live peacefully. So on days where I have to go to my church in the evenings after work, I, of course, because I live 3 minutes away from the metro station near me, hop on a metro station, go to work. From work, I would, depending on traffic and search prices, I might Uber to my church or hop on the metro. And after church activities, I would take a hike or ride back with my friends who live in the city, and they drop me off at the closest nearest station, the closest metro station to their homes, and I just hop on, go back home in one piece. Well, this particular evening, my friends were not at church service, and there is a gentleman that I used to be friends with, and I can no longer call a friend after this incident.
Mm.
I reached out to him and I was like, hey, are you going straight home after service? And they were like, no, not really. Why, what's up? And I said, oh, never mind. I was about to ask you if you could just drop me off at, the metro station at my job because I know that it's close to where this person lives. And I was like, yeah, I'll take you. So I get to the metro, go home. I was starving, went home, ate, fell asleep, did not text this person to let them know that I made it home safely. Then tried to remind myself the very next day to send that text message and not forget. And I didn't remember to text the person until like closer to 3 p.m. So when I opened my phone to send this text message, to my surprise, they had already reached out to me. I felt so bad until I read what followed. Hey there, dot, dot, dot. I hope you are well today. I want to share that I'm not interested in you in any way. My
Mm.
kindness last evening is not indication of interest. It has been brought to my attention today that several individuals have inquired if you and I are, in quotation marks, a thing. It was unexpected and embarrassing. You're a delightful person, but it's extremely important for me to be explicitly clear about where I stand, especially with women. No need to respond, dot, dot, dot. I want to be clear All the best.
Wow.
Even as I'm reading the text message now, I have the same
You can
smile
hear
on
it in
my
her
face,
voice.
like trying hard not to laugh. Like, is this guy who is not even my type, nowhere close to my type, that I have zero interest in, very serious? So then I respond to their text message saying, well, this is awkward. Thank you for sharing. I am very sorry that happened to you, and I was never under that impression. Also, I hope that you will confirm that I have never approached you or made a pass at you. So I'm not sure where the in quotation marks, I just want to be clear statement came from.
Right.
But thanks for looping me into, I guess, what others' perception is. No sooner do I send that text message, I was just filled with disgust. So I pick up my phone and I called this person and I said, hey, just want to follow up on our exchange because it was weird. And at my age, I think that we're better than this. We could have a conversation. Am I missing something? And this person said, no, not at all. Like, two people just asked directly if you and I were a thing. And I just wanted to, just set the record straight. And I said, with who? With me? And I said, I'm sorry, but did they specifically say that I said that we were a thing or insinuated or said anything about us? And he said, no. And I said, so at this point, your message does not even come across as you wanted to set, the record straight between you and I. This just looks like you're covering your tracks. And, if that is the case, you do what you have to do, but I believe that I deserved better than this. And I'm at a loss for words, but thank you for sharing just the same. And I got off the phone.
Mm. Group chat. What are we thinking? Yeah, it's really unfortunate because did she say that the ride was like 3 minutes to the metro? I feel like she said that.
I couldn't tell if it was 3 or 30.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
I think she said it was like a 3-minute ride.
Okay, maybe it was.
And this is, first of all, this is what I love about group chat and just love about this show because, on one small end, it's like, sure, it's romantic relationship dynamics, but also this is just like communication dynamics.
Yeah.
And so I would say to my friend, if she sent this in our group chat, like, so proud of you for saying something, you know what I mean? And saying, hey, this made me feel uncomfortable and I don't know where this is coming from. But also like speaking to this is one of the frustrations I think that Christian single women have is it's like, man, I've heard this before from friends. It's like, if I try to have friends, they think does she like me? Is she trying to be with me?
Yeah.
Or if I hang out with you and your husband, it's like that. I have heard single women tell me that other married women will say, I'm not comfortable with you around my husband, which is just like, this is crazy. You know what I mean? That we're doing this to people and making people feel ostracized because they're not in a relationship.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think how we treat each other as brothers and sisters in Christ is so important.
Yeah.
I do not like that he said that this is embarrassing for me. Like, I just think that
to give a ride. This is wild.
Right. And I think clarity is kindness. And so I love that she was clear. And I think that it's good that he wants to be clear with her too. But also, like, she is the daughter of a king. You are the daughter of, like, let's treat each other as sons and daughters of kings and treat each other with respect. I think in Christian dating, it can get so weird and hard.
Just let's not be weird.
Right.
Let's just try to not be weird. And you can give a ride to somebody without it being this big thing that you have to now cover your tracks to make sure everybody knows. It's like,
right.
If I would say this, if somebody is not like flirting with you or making it clear that they're interested, just assume that they're not.
Yeah.
Unless especially when we're adults.
Yeah. Yeah.
if you want to share your voice memo or a written question saying, hey, is this conversation, is what happened to me holy or horrible? Send it to us at whatifimwrongpod@gmail.com. We would love to share your voice memo with the group chat or your written experience in the group chat. Okay, before we get to submissions, let's define the term. By the way, I've had a few messages from people saying, I love define the term. I love that segment. And it made me so happy because my little communication heart, I'm not teaching anymore. And so when I was thinking through what we wanted in this podcast, I think I said it to you, Haley. I was like, is this dumb or is this fun? Because I love words and I love language and I like knowing the definition of words. So I'm so glad that a few of you have DM'd me and said, I love define the term. So remember, in this segment, I will tell you a word and then I'm going to give you its actual definition. And I want you to ask yourself how knowing the actual definition may change how you see your relationship with that word. Today's term is faith. Faith. And I want to go through this word faith. I want to read you an excerpt from my book, What If I'm Wrong? And this is on page 135, and it's about the definition of faith. It says this: in The Sin of Certainty by biblical scholar Peter Enns, you get a vocabulary shift for all the baggage wrapped up in your faith understanding. The premise of his book is that while the Greek word for faith, pistis, does describe beliefs, get this, there is a complementary component to it that people often overlook. Pistis has an underlying property of trust. Peter Enns argues that we must be careful not to trust our beliefs about God more than God himself. The gospel ultimately is not about right thinking or beliefs. The gospel is not about our own moral superiority. The gospel is not about us at all. It is about who Jesus is and what he did within the context of the Jewish story that now brings living water to all the world. He brought order out of chaos. God is committed to humanity despite humanity. The reason this shift is so important is because there may be days when you don't know what you believe anymore. And when that happens, it becomes much more important that you know who you trust. Faith is about our trusting in the work that Jesus did. Essentially, Enns believes that faith is not a what, but a who. I absolutely love that definition of faith, that faith is not a what, it is a who. So in summary, I just want to say this: faith is not just about having the right thinking in my circumstance. Faith has an underlying component of trust. When you aren't sure what you know, faith says, I know who I trust.
Yeah. I think that's so freeing because
yes,
it's like we don't have to have it all figured out. We know who we have our faith in, and that's what matters. It's like when you're going through doubt or uncertainty, we don't have to know the answers, but we know Jesus, and it just kind of shifts our focus from having all the right answers or beliefs to plainly just trusting in Jesus.
And that goes back to, I'm telling you, with my book, What If I'm Wrong? Haley, you just summarized it. That's the point. If Jesus asks more questions than he gives answers, and Jesus knows and has all the answers and doesn't feel the need to give them, what does that say? Right? But Jesus does feel the need to build relationship and say, can you trust me? I promise you can trust me. I'm going to show you that I'm trustworthy. Your relationship with God, your faith is about knowing who you can trust. So I'm super excited to go through our submissions today, Haley, because we have brought on a little guest, Mike Planeta. Thank you so much for joining the pod. Mike was on season 17 of The Bachelorette. Am I right?
You were, yeah.
Season 17 of he was everybody's favorite.
No.
A speaking. Absolutely. Absolutely. Fan favorite. I was doing a speaking engagement in California and at Loma Linda, and Mike was there too. And that's where I met him, and we became fast friends. And Mike has been out of the country for most of the last couple of years. So we're super happy that he made time to go through submissions with us today.
No, thank you for having me.
All right. Are you guys ready?
Yeah, I'm ready if you guys are ready.
Let's get to it. Okay, so she says, I'm 26, but I feel so lost and clueless in life. I don't know how the entire half year went by, and only a few months are left until the new year begins. I'm so invested in my thoughts and overthinking that I'm not able to find clarity in real life present moments. I
Mm,
feel like I'm living my life in fear and boundaries. It's constant overthinking and anxiety that drives me nuts. I don't know who I am. My soul doesn't feel connected. They say our mind is the most powerful tool to changing our life, but I just feel frozen. I
mm,
still haven't found a path in life. I want to make money so I can help my family and create a better life, but that requires hard work and dedication. Not finding a purpose or understanding what I truly want makes me fall back, and I just feel lost in this maze. Seeing stuff on TikTok and Instagram and people my age making X amount of money, investing in properties, traveling, working for a good company, and so on. Like, I don't feel jealous, but I want to be there someday. I don't know what's preventing me from doing anything.
mm. Any thoughts on that, Mike? I know, like, first of all, I just want to say, like, I have absolutely, I in my book, in What If I'm Wrong, I open one of the chapters with with how much money was in my bank
Mm,
account at a certain time, and it was like, I think it's called $212.40. So I know what the feeling is when financial insecurity then feels like, oh my goodness, everybody else is so far ahead, questioning whether or not God is with me because of my circumstances. Like, I just want to say, I get all that. And I also know what it feels like to be so, like, I want to get this right, that I almost feel paralyzed by that.
Mhm.
What about you, Mike?
Yeah, I got a few thoughts on that. One, I think you're not alone. Everybody goes through this and feels this. And so I want to empathize with that because I feel like as you get older, you realize that everybody is feeling this way and nobody really has it figured out, no matter how successful they look. That's one thing
Right.
as I've matured, I've gotten older. I'm like, oh wait, you too? I looked at you as somebody that was like super successful. I didn't realize you were trying to figure it all out, whether that's financially, whether that's spiritually, whether that's friendships, romantic, whatever it is, right? We're all trying to figure it out. The one thing I'll point out is comparison is the thief of joy. One, don't compare yourself to others because that is gonna, it's just gonna take away your joy. And we're also comparing ourselves to essentially highlight reels too, especially in the social media space. And we're all guilty of it. But I think it's a slippery slope to go down. I also think too is I was actually having this conversation with somebody the other day. Is I think we've kind of warped what providing is or what God provides us with as we've kind of warped that with wealth. We're not promised wealth, but we are promised that God's going to provide for us. So I think creating that healthy perspective as well. I don't think God hates money, but God hates the love of money. So I think ultimately I wouldn't get so
mm-hmm.
fixated on the dollar sign itself. I would become fixated on, am I walking hand in hand with what God's purpose is for my life? And that's kind of the approach that I take. And also money comes in ebbs and flows, right? Like there's peaks and valleys. And
Mm-hmm.
not only that is when we focus really and not just focus but communicate this with God, where we go, hey, where is it that you're calling me to go? And asking the people that you respect around you, asking your mentors, having those people in your life that are speaking life into you. I feel like all that stuff starts to play itself out. And again, scripture tells us about this, right? It says, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. And to he just continues to speak life in us and tell us like we don't have to worry about all that stuff. One of my favorite scriptures is, is God provides for the birds, and I'm paraphrasing, but he provides for the birds. You don't think he loves you more, like he's going to provide for you? So I empathize. I don't think these feelings ever fully go away if we're in a healthy spiritual place,
Mm,
because we're always calling ourselves to
Mm-hmm.
to be higher. Um so one of my mentors said something really good. He said, lean into the tension. And that's my encouragement here, is lean into that tension, and lean into it with God. If you do that, the rest, it kind of takes care of itself. And you start to realize as you get older and wiser, as you go, oh wow, like I was really stressing about things that were really out of my control, and God really is a good God, and He's going to provide what I need.
Yeah. How do
Yeah.
you manage that with the comparison thing? Because it is like we spend so much of our time literally scrolling through everybody who looks more beautiful or better or richer or
Mhm.
you know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like it seems like they're just crushing it. And then it's easy to look at our own lives. How do we, I don't know if either of you have an answer for that.
Oh, I feel that. I absolutely feel that. And for me is one thing. I had a coach when I was younger, and he said something that was really profound. He said don't look at what this guy who's all conference, and don't look at his highlight tape and think that that's something that happened overnight, because it didn't. You're comparing yourself to something when you don't realize,
Mm.
you don't even understand what it actually took to get there. And then also sometimes too, the flip side of that with social media now is you can actually project a highlight when you're actually struggling, and that's not the reality of what's going on. So
Mhm.
is my challenge to people is especially her is try to be as, give yourself a lot of grace and understand that just because something looks the way that it is doesn't mean that's exactly what it is. And even if that person is thriving, try to create a perspective that that didn't happen overnight. And I'm big on consistency. If you're consistent, especially if you're aligned with where God's calling you to go, like He will provide. And we just can't. I've said this in the past. The devil is so deceptive, and he that's what he wants. He wants us to kind of fall into despair. But my challenge, like I said, is find hope and understanding that like God's going to provide, and not only in that is He going to provide, but He's going to be with us each step of the way, the peaks and the valleys. So don't get so fixated on what you're seeing. Try to create a healthy perspective and understand that that stuff doesn't happen overnight, and sometimes that reality is not actually what it is.
I love Mike talking about mentors.
And one last tip, actually.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, please.
Yeah, one last tip, actually, and I forgot is one thing I've found that actually helps me combat that is being really vulnerable in the areas where I'm struggling. So let's say if I am having these thoughts, and
Mhm.
I think she did a great job of actually expressing this. That's the first step to actually finding growth in these areas where it's like, hey, I
Yeah.
don't have it figured out. How do I get better at this, right? That to me is going to eliminate comparison in a lot of ways, because you're seeking you're becoming coachable and you're seeking wisdom. So and slowly but surely, you'll realize that it's in those moments where you actually see people who are truly successful because they're seeking growth instead of somebody that's projecting something they're not.
Yeah, I love Mike talks a lot about his mentors, and that's something that has been so beneficial to me. And so maybe find a mentor too.
Mhm.
That
Mm.
has really changed my life. And one of the best pieces of advice my mentor gave me probably 7 years ago was to assume the role. Like wherever you want to be in 10 years, he's like, you live that out today. So, what
Mhm.
choices are you making today, right, that are going to keep you on a trajectory, not to have your life change tomorrow, but maybe 10 years from now, if you stay consistent in these behaviors and these choices and these decisions, are going to make a
Mhm.
massive impact. So, I'd say to assume the role. I don't know if you had anything, Haley.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I feel like she seems like she has a lot of self-awareness, which is great. And I think something for me that I do that I see a lot of fruit in is I I know that social media will bring me anxiety,
Yeah.
insecurity. It's not a good thing. It can be, you can share the gospel, you can do really great things with social media, but a lot of the time it is a comparison thing. And so
Mhm.
what I have started to do is have more self awareness of like before I even open social media, kind of thinking, okay, am I feeling insecure about anything right now? Because if I am, and then I go on social media, it's going to make it
Yeah.
worse. And so
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
think just like her having this self awareness is going to be so beneficial. And then, yeah, the comparison thing, that is like the hardest. Comparison is so hard. And we see that so much in our culture and like in the world. And so I think just like really spending time with the Lord and processing through that with the Lord is what's going to be so so helpful and so fruitful in your life.
Yeah, I won't get on social media unless I've had worship. That's one of my
Yeah.
rules.
And that's what I was just going to say. You hit it on the head is set the reality and then set a boundary. And whatever that boundary is for you when you're on
Yeah.
social media, it's going to create a healthy perspective. And that's something that is only going to put us in a healthier space.
Haley, put that in the show notes. Set the reality and then set the boundary. That's good.
I'll put it in the show notes.
That could be like on a t-shirt or a little mug. That's
Well, one thing too, like one thing I always see this about like David is like David wasn't crowned king right away when he was found. First and foremost, he was in a
yes.
shepherd's field, you know what I mean? And then not only that,
Yeah.
it wasn't all smooth. Then he had to go against Goliath. And then not only that, I mean, he was essentially running for his life because he was trying to be taken out by Saul. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of things where, again, create that healthy perspective because anything great, it doesn't just happen easy and overnight.
I love that, Mike, and I want to bring this home before we go because what you just said goes back to like about David assume the role because
Mhm.
when he's in the cave of Adullam, and the only people with him are like the poor and like some wayward people who are discontent with society, and he leads them.
Yeah.
Like David is a king. He acts as though he's a king. He assumes the role of king long before he's ever crowned
Hmm.
king. There's like
Yeah.
15, I think, years in between, 13 years in between there. So good. Thank you so much. Mike, I just love when you come on. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're so glad that you paused your travels for a minute.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love what you said about that last point is like you're so right is don't wait for that moment to come to where what the world's telling you that, this is your moment. This is you'll be great when that moment comes. No, practice those healthy habits now. And it's in those moments
Yeah.
where your character is defined and we also weren't promised these big moments. Those big moments are the small moments, and I think that's what God's calling us to be. So, hey, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for having me on. You guys are the best, and I love that we get to talk about things that actually matter. This is kingdom stuff.
This is kingdom stuff. Also put that in the show notes. Thanks so much for joining us, Mike.
Yeah, no problem.
I want to close every episode with a segment I call Day in the Bible. And this is where I share something I have learned in Bible study with you that will beg the question, what if I'm wrong about how I have been reading or thinking or explaining the Bible passage that I'm going through? Today, we are going to look at Genesis 45. And I want to recap the story of Joseph for a second. And then I want to go to verses 7 through 8 in Genesis 45. So the story of Joseph is, if you aren't familiar with the Bible at all, is essentially that Jacob has 12 sons. And Joseph is one of them, and he's the favorite child. And his dad makes him like a little favoritism coat that he wears. And he has these dreams that God is going to bless him in some way. And all the other brothers bow down to him in his dreams. And Joseph he thinks it's a good idea to just share this with all of the brothers. And because sometimes we miss this in scripture too. Part of the problem is that Joseph is not the oldest, right? So there is a rite of passage and a double portion that's supposed to go to the oldest son. And Joseph is not the oldest. And yet he's saying that he's going to get this inheritance from his father, or that the rest of them are going to bow down to him. Okay, it doesn't sit well. They essentially sell Joseph into slavery, and he ends up in prison. Just goes through a really rough time, and ends up in prison. Then interprets dreams, which dreams were the beginning of Joseph's story, right? He interprets this dream from the cupbearer and the baker, and then he ends up being the right hand man of Pharaoh during a famine in Egypt. And so he's now ruling all of Egypt, and his brothers come back. And Joseph, there's like this moment in the story where you're like, oh my goodness, what's he going to do? Is he going to treat them the way that they had treated him? Or are we going to see like this massive move of God and forgiveness and reunification? And of course, in the story of Joseph, we see a massive move of forgiveness. So one thing I want to say before I share these verses, the story of Joseph in America, we tend to read this story and we only think like from pit to palace. We think the story of Joseph and the point of Joseph is that Joseph ends up in favor with the world and ruling Egypt. That is not the story. That's not the point that the first century readers would have gotten. The majority of Joseph getting to the palace is like a very short part of Genesis. Joseph now reuniting with the family, that is the majority of the story. And so I want you to understand that as the backdrop as I read this to you. The point of the story of Joseph that you're supposed to take away and that the first century reader would have taken away is that there's a reunification of the family and that the family is not complete, whether Joseph's in a pit or a palace, until they're all together. So Genesis 45 verse 7 reads, God, this is Joseph saying to his brothers, God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Here is verses 8-9. So then, it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all of Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and say to him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me and don't delay. So there's a reunification of the family. Here is what you may be getting wrong about the story of Joseph. Okay. The story of Joseph is not about Joseph's position. It's about what he does to fulfill his purpose. Joseph could have gotten to the palace and not reunified the family, and he would not have fulfilled God's purpose for him. Your purpose is not a job. It is not to become a doctor. It is not to become a lawyer. It is not to get married. It is not to be whatever it is, to get the PhD, whatever it is, the dream that you have in your mind. And you're saying, that's my purpose and I just got to get there. That's not your purpose. Your purpose is what you do with what is in your hand. And how are you through your life re-engaging and reunifying the family of God together? Joseph could have had the position and not have fulfilled his purpose. You can become a doctor and miss your purpose. Your purpose is not a job or a position. Your purpose is to do what Paul says in Ephesians 4:1-3. Therefore, I, the prisoner in the Lord, urge you to walk worthy of the calling you have received. What's the calling you have received, friend? To walk with all humility. What if I'm wrong? And gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. May we reunify the family of God. This is our purpose. That's it for today's episode. Join us next week as we continue in our theme about passion and purpose and all this conversation. Haley, what are we talking about next week?
Next week, we are talking about purpose in a world that doesn't seem to care. You can send me your submissions if you want us to discuss whatever experience you are questioning on the podcast. Email me at whatifimwrongpod@gmail.com.
And you can send those submissions in a voice memo as well. We would love to get them. I'm Heather Thompson Day, and I'll see you next week.